I would like to begin this show by first thanking our dear friend Raven Dana, associate producer and series advisor, for reading the first draft script. She saw things in the first draft she thought that maybe we should change. Now, Raven is a long time experiencer with this subject matter and has a long history of encounters. And one of them happened in Whitley Strieber's cabin back in the 80s, when she woke up one morning and she saw a visitor standing on the edge of her bed. Now, we'll go into this in another show in the future, but what she had to say to me was very important. She said, "Steve, don't tell people what this show isn't. Tell people what it is. That you will be safe with us. You can tell your story to us. You can go on camera and tell people exactly what happened. We know why you didn't do it before, because you feared the stigma. You feared the disbelief, the skeptics, the debunkers, all of it. It's happened to me. It's happened to all of us who have gone on network shows, talk honestly about our experiences, and what happens every time. They tell us that we're going to give you a safe environment and you're not going to have to worry about any of that stuff. We're going to treat you with respect. And then you watch the show and you're humiliated. That will never happen with us. We will always believe you, and you can always feel safe and tell your story." Now, with that said, let me tell you how our show is going to be different. How our show is going to be different is this way. In the past, we have had shows done in this subject matter, and basically they go out, they interview people that have claimed these experiences. They neither believe you or disbelieve you. It's just something to do. They go and they do it, they shoot it, they put it on camera, and they go back to the editorial bay and they start cutting the footage together, and then they decide they need to add reenactments to it. So they get actors and they put Halloween masks on them and they make it all scary and full of booze. And at the end of the show, then they always have the classic skeptic debunker on to talk about how these people are delusional, or maybe they are schizophrenic, a myriad of things that they will say about you. That is not going to be our method, not our method at all. What we're going to do is we're going to work closely with the Close Encounters witness or experiencer. We're going to get every detail we can about what they saw, about how it looked, how it appeared, and we're going to replicate that as exactly as we possibly can. Because I've had a lot of experience with this, and everybody on our team has. We're going to do this for you, for all of us out there who have had these experiences and have never had it treated well before. In this first episode, we'll begin this journey by exploring my own personal background and experience with non-human intelligence encounters. My name is Steve Neal, and welcome to Breaking the Silence. Before I go into how this all began for me, let me point out something that some of you watching this show may not be aware of. In our future, we will be finding planets, and when we have the capability, which is not too far away, we'll go to those planets and explore it, and then we'll become the UFO. So do you really think the Earth has gone undiscovered? No, it hasn't. And how do I know this? Because it all began one night back in 1958 when I was 6 years old in my bedroom at 3 in the morning. From that night until today, I've had ongoing encounters all my life. But I never forgot that night, never. That one stuck out in my mind and stayed with me to this very moment. And when I review it, I get chills all over again. I was wide awake. I wasn't in a dream. I wasn't asleep. It was real, and I knew it. I kept this all silent. I kept it to myself. I didn't want to tell anyone about it. I didn't know what they'd think. So I was cautious. And it wouldn't be until 1987 when my late wife, Jilly, brought home a book for me to read entitled Communion that I would start connecting the dots. I still have this book, and this book really changed my life because up to this point, I thought I was the only person who had these experiences or had that experience. And in reading Whitley's encounters, what he experienced, they were so similar, it was bone-chilling. And I wasn't alone. There were millions of other people that read this book as well and sent him letters, lots of letters. And both he and his wife, Ann Strieber, put together a book called The Communion Letters that I would read years later. But here were people that I didn't even know, I couldn't have met. There was no internet in 1987. The internet really wouldn't be born until the early 90s. And yet we all shared the same, almost identical experience, witnessed and saw the same beings, the same crafts. We all spoke about the dead silence of these events and much, much more. It's changed my life because I started to realize that I had had these encounters all along. And as I thought back through my childhood and thought about all the UFOs that I'd seen with my friends and witnesses around me, I started to realize it just wasn't by chance I was seeing these objects in the sky. We had a relationship. In the 1990s, I met Yvonne Smith, Whitley Strieber, and Roger Lear. I became friends with all three of these wonderful people. And working with Yvonne, I got my own hypnosis regressions, but I also worked with her as a sketch artist. In other words, I would work with her clients or her witnesses that she put in hypnosis who wanted to have lost memories revealed. And I would work with them closely, and I started doing drawings of what they saw. Mostly, it was the same thing that I saw. And I did lots of artwork on this subject. I did hundreds of pieces. They were used in magazines, TV shows, even X-Files. My work was everywhere. I appeared in all kinds of TV programs with Whitley, with Yvonne, with Roger Lear on this subject matter. My full-size sculptures were seen everywhere. And I really think that a lot of that kind of made this image that we see today so prevalent of the classic black-eyed gray alien. I worked for the History Channel, Paranormal Borderline, and many other shows at that time. Sightings was another one. All the reenactment work I did using my masks and full-size figures and puppetry. I worked on a lot of shows. I appeared on The Other Side, and I did a TV show with Whitley called NBC's Confirmation. But in all this time, the things you hear about or saw in X-Files started happening to me. That's right, I saw black helicopters. And they weren't all black. Some of them were marked, but they were harassing us. When I say us, they were harassing my family. They followed my late wife, Jilly, home from the grocery store one day. So low. It was a Bell Jet Ranger. It was white. It had N numbers on it. I took pictures of it up close. I later had someone that I know down at Van Nuys Airport find out who owned those N numbers. And as it turned out, it was a rental. That helicopter flew so low, it terrified my neighbors. They were coming out of the house as Jilly pulled up into the driveway and was trying to get the groceries out. It was hovering. You could feel the wind from it. And everyone was looking at us like, what had we done? This went on and on and on. There were always helicopters during that time flying around the house and circling it, but there was a lot more. We were followed. There were people sitting in the bushes that would take flash pictures of us and run away. There were people hiding in the bushes at night because my work, working in film, and I did a lot of visual effects, required that I had deadlines. And those deadlines meant I was up very late. And then people would come from the studio to pick up the footage from me. So people were coming all hours of the night. And more than one occasion, they were coming to my little studio at the house, and someone would bolt out of the bushes and go running to a car and tear off. There was more. The phone was tapped. And also, I got emails from allegedly the CIA and NSA telling me that I was not supposed to be discussing this with the public, and it wasn't in my best interest to do it. Now, I thought this was all a hoax. I really did. I thought, really? The CIA and the NSA are writing to me about this? I mean, just somebody's trying to pull my leg. So I ignored it. And I ignored most of the stuff for a long time. And then one day, Julie came home with a big giant pile of mail. Our mail had been sent back to a lot of people who were buying my artwork depicting the Greys and sculptures and masks that I had made during that time that were very popular. Now, this was all done via snail mail. And so people were writing to me and ordering these things and putting money in them, and I wasn't getting the money anymore. I know this because some of them called me on the phone and said, I got your letter back with my money in it. What's going on? You're not living there anymore? So this tipped us off, and then Jilly went to the post office, and the guy there said he couldn't help us. And she went back again, and then he brought out a ton of mail that wasn't even ours and said, this is your mail. It was just getting weirder and weirder all the time. So the final straw is I got a phone call one day. And that phone call was from the studio, one I'd worked with before. And the gal there asked me, are you in trouble with the law? And I laughed and I said, no, I'm not in trouble with the law. Why would you ask that? Well, some very scary people came here in suits with very official looking IDs and said it wasn't in our best interest to continue working with you anymore. And so they ceased to work with me. And a lot of my work started to dry up, and I wondered at that time, how many other studios did they go to? And the studio never called me to find out. I'll never know. And the work I was doing for the studios? I was a creature maker. I made monsters and aliens. I did everything from Mr. Spock's ears to Ghosts for Ghostbusters and a whole lot more. Not to mention all the creatures and things I made for these shows on the paranormal. But my work was everywhere. In other words, I did a lot of work making a lot of creepy, cool stuff. Eventually, I ended up started working for the History Channel doing UFO files and doing CGI for them. But the bottom line here is they threatened my career. I knew they meant business. If that was going on, I doubted that that was a hoax. And reflecting back on it, I knew that those emails were actually genuine. This terrified Jilly and me so much that I decided to leave the UFO community. I wrote a final letter. I put it out on the internet, which by this time we did have the internet because it was about 1999 at this point. So it had been almost 9 years. And they meant business. And Jilly asked me to get out of it, or she threatened to leave me. So I did. I did have one last radio show though. And I did the show because I agreed to it. And even on the show, I said, something will happen because I did this show tonight, I guarantee you. After the show, I came out. Jilly asked me how it went. I said it was pretty good. You know, this is the end of it. I'm done with this. And then the sound started to happen over the house. This bum, 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 bum. And I knew what it was. It was a big Sikorsky helicopter. You know, being an aviator as I am, I knew the sound. So I went outside through the glass doors leading to the backyard. Jilly asked me not to do it. I did it anyway. It was near sunset. And I looked out and there was this big black helicopter hovering over a house. I could see a guy sitting inside of it. He had a white shirt on and a tie. He had a helmet on with black bug-eyed visors down. And I looked at him and I waved and saluted, and he saluted me back. I asked Jilly by waving at her to come out. She reluctantly came out. She saw the helicopter. It shined a light at us. He then turned and moved off towards the north over the hills. I lived in Granada Hills at the time. and that was the last I ever saw of them. So that was it. 1999, I left the scene. I went back into my work as much as I could get it, worked in the industry, did the best I could. In 2013, Jilly passed away, and I moved to Ventura. And around 2017, I was highly encouraged to start writing about it again. And Mary and myself started the first film on a series of films we would do called But Something Is There. Now that you can watch that film, it's online. You'll see a link below when you're watching the show, so you can go and look at it. We did 2 more films and we got a 4th one coming up. The point is, all that time I didn't talk about it at all. So I started talking about it again. I'm talking about it right now. I did the films. I got more involved again because really, it wasn't happening anymore. There were no more helicopters, phone taps, and people after me, and I'm still here, despite everything I've done in the last 4 or 5 years. Today, I've written 2 books, 3 films, and a 4th one currently in production on this subject matter. So what's changed? I mean, something's different. I know one thing, the media is different. They're not laughing at it as much, not since our government's released all kinds of video from pilots' point of view of Tic Tacs and other UAPs because of the stuff that's been happening in Congress, because of the whistleblowers. It's starting to get a bit more credibility, and this may have changed the climate, and this might be why people who are talking about this stuff are being left alone. Oddly enough, some people were never bothered by it, but they did pick on me, and they picked on other people I know too. It's just not happening right now. Otherwise, we wouldn't be making this show. How this show happened is it occurred to us. We own a studio. We have lots of equipment. We're completely set up to do visual effects, camera work, sound. We really don't need any outside help to make a show like this, so why not make it? Not to mention 50 years or more of experience with this subject matter and all the people I know connected to it, from Whitley Strieber to Yvonne Smith and more. It was a natural. We can make this show exactly the way we want to make it and tell the story and be truthful about it like never before. And that's what we're going to do. And before we end this first episode, I want to give you a little flavor for what you can expect from us both visually and storytelling wise. And I'm going to start with an experience that happened to me in Fraser Park back in 1980s. I've always been an amateur astronomer. Going back as far as I can remember, I've always had a telescope. In fact, in the early 1970s, when I started to become quite successful in my career, I had the money finally to buy myself a Celestron telescope, one of my very favorites. It's a Schmidt-Cassegrain. It's a great telescope, great for doing astrophotography where you take deep sky images with long-term exposures. I had a friend, and I'm going to leave his name out of this because, well, as you'll find out as the story goes on, why I'm leaving his name out of this. It wouldn't be fair to him. But we used to go on astronomy trips all the time, and he had a Celestron telescope as well. We used to go to a place called Fraser Park, and it's about, an hour and a half outside of Los Angeles, high up in the mountains where there was really good viewing of the night sky. When it was a moonless night, you could see the Milky Way like a cloud going across the sky, and it was ideal. And this particular night we got there, and it was a perfect night. It was wonderful. We were going to stay at a cabin that was a friend of his cabin that lived close by. And so we went to the cabin, we visited with this friend, and then we went to this location not too far from the cabin that was a big wide open field surrounded by forest. We sat up there, we watched the sun go down, we got excited, and we started doing long-term time exposures. Now, it's called off-axis guiding. What that means is in those days, we didn't have computers, so in order to have a very long time exposure, maybe sometimes as long as 20 minutes to expose the object onto film, you had to guide the telescope manually, and we did this by using something called an off-axis guide. The off-axis guide, you would pick a star near the object, get the object in the frame of the telescope. In my case, it was the Ring Nebula, and you would track that star in the off-axis guiding scope. As long as you kept that star right in the center of the crosshairs throughout the exposure, when you stop the exposure to develop the film, you have a beautiful picture of the Orion Nebula, or the Ring Nebula, or the Dumbbell Nebula, or Andromeda, which were a lot of the things that we shot. On that particular night, I was shooting the Ring Nebula, and I had been into the exposure probably about 15 to 20 minutes, and then there was this light shining in the corner of my eye. It was really bright as I looked through the eyepiece, and this kind of made me mad, so I stopped the exposure. I looked up over at my friend, and I was about to say, "What are you doing?" Because I figured he's shining a flashlight, and I don't know why he would do that. But what I saw was not what I expected. My friend was standing there, frozen, with his arms at his side, away from his telescope, looking at this rather large ball of light. It was just a soft, pale, kind of yellow light, like an orb, but quite large. The other thing I noticed was it was completely silent. Again, it was just this vacuum. There were no dogs barking in the distance, there were crickets, there wasn't wind, there wasn't anything. It was just dead silence. I was fascinated, so I decided to go over and take a closer look, at which point my friend said, "Don't do that. You don't know what you're doing. Don't go near that." As I got closer to it, it started to move away from me, and then it wobbled and it moved from one side to the other, and then it started to move away, slowly at first, and so I started running after it. And as I did, it went faster and faster, and it kind of went up in the air a bit and then dipped down like it went into the ground. And I got to the edge of a cliff there, or a sharp incline, and as I stood there, I watched it dip into the valley below, into the fog below, and disappear. So I ran back over to the site, to our telescopes, and already my friend was breaking his telescope down and putting it away. The night was still young, and I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I just want to get out of here." He was visibly shaken by what he saw, and he did not want to stay. So we packed up, went back to the cabin, and we sat around talking about it a little bit. He really didn't want to talk about it. We both fell asleep on the couch. It was very dark in the place. And the next thing I knew was there was a light in my eyes again. And when I opened them, there were bright lights coming in through the windows of the living room and the cabin, and backlit was a figure over me saying, "Wake up." And that was the last thing I remembered. That was until many years later when I had hypnosis with Yvonne Smith. And what was revealed was unbelievable. That little creature led me through the cabin and pulled me straight through a wall. It pulled me out into the backyard behind the cabin, which was faced by a forest of trees. And I could see between the trees something glowing. It led me through the woods. It took me into this clearing, and there was this disc hovering there, not touching the ground. There was a door open in it with soft light coming out of it. The little creature grabbed my hand and pulled me up to the door. Once inside, I was taken down a long corridor into a room that appeared to look like an examination room. There were other figures there waiting for me. I'm going to stop there for now. We can revisit this and go into more detail in a future show. Now, there has been a lot of debate about hypnosis, and this seems to only come up with regards to this subject matter. Because when this type of hypnosis is used in law enforcement, it's given a lot of praise. Because to be honest, it's helped capture a lot of bad guys, and it's considered a very useful tool. But with close encounters of the third kind, no. But I worked with Yvonne Smith, and I'm here to tell you, never once did she ever say to me in over 30 sessions, "Do you see aliens in the room? We are not alone. We have never been alone, and this planet was discovered a long time ago, and there is a presence here. We don't know what it is exactly, but something is there. We hope you enjoyed this first introductory episode. I wanted to kind of give you the lay of the land. A lot of the stuff I talked about, I know you already know about, but there's plenty of people watching the show for the first time that don't realize it. And the thing that you need to do, if you're one of those people, is don't listen to the hearsay. Investigate for yourself. Go online. Talk to credible people and be informed about this subject before you have any judgment on the subject. I highly recommend it. There is so much material out there that is not fringe, that isn't tinfoil hat oriented, that legitimate people from every walk of life have experienced UFOs, UAPs, whatever you like to call them, have had encounters with non-human beings, and it's prolific. It's everywhere, and it's been like that for years and years and years. One needs to simply explore it for themselves. I know you're out there. I know there's plenty of you. And you're listening to me right now and saying, I've never wanted to talk about this because I was afraid. I was afraid of the ridicule. But we would like to invite you to reach out to us, to engage us, to come on our show and tell your story. We'll set up the camera at your home in an environment where you're comfortable with minimal crew, just people that understand you, that maybe have had the experience themselves. Most of the people in the room with you will have had those experiences or have been witness to something they couldn't explain. So you can be comfortable and tell your story. Tell your truth to all of us. We could use your help. How? You can help by hitting the subscribe button and the like button. And we'll see you next time.